Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Lobby, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock back together again after a few days apart after the conclusion of the NFL Combine. We are back in Berea. Today, we had coordinator press conferences. So there's a lot to get into. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball. We have talked a lot about quarterbacks. Obviously, we will continue to talk a lot about quarterbacks, but I do think the most anticipated press conference today was probably that of new defensive coordinator Mike Rutenberg. The way I put it in the video that we just recorded, Mary Kay, was we were promised tons of energy from Mike Rutenberg, and he delivered tons of energy. What were your first impressions of this new defensive coordinator? It was a very hard task at hand to replace Jim Schwartz.
Wow, he packs a wallop. I mean, he is going to make his presence felt on this football team, on this defense, in those meeting rooms. We are going to hear him. We are going to see him. And he is just not a shrinking violet by any stretch of the imagination. And he talked a lot about playing violent football, but also leading with the heart. He's very emotional. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. And I really liked him. I really liked the energy that he brought. I thought it was really cool. I think a lot of the players are going to really respond to that. I think he's someone that has demonstrated throughout his career that he gets players working for him, rallying around him, and really caring about him as a person. And a lot of times that translates to wanting to work really hard on the field. But I was ready to run through a wall for him. So I know the players probably will be.
Ashley, all I could think of is with his energy, when you watch college football on Saturday, you see just a handful of defensive coordinators that are just nuts on the sideline. And I don't think you see that as much in the NFL, but I do think with this team and this young group, I think that's going to resonate with a lot of these guys. And with the guys that are maybe, the veterans who are older guys, I don't think it matters, right? Like Denzel's going to be Denzel. Miles is going to be Miles. But as far as just the energy level and the way he coaches and just that go, go, go mentality, I think that's going to resonate with a really young defense.
I do too. And, I think they already have some of that in their position coaches. Like, I think about a guy like Jason Tarver, the linebackers coach, who's really intense. Ephraim Banda, who is the passing game coordinator now, but was the safeties coach here the last few years. He's a guy from the college ranks, very intense. Jacques Césaire, the D-line coach, I think about him helping to lift Myles Garrett on people's shoulders after he broke the sack record. Like, they have some assistants who obviously have stayed on, who kind of also have that mentality, and we've gotten to see it resonate with these players and help, I think, be a key part of what has been one of the best defenses over a 3-year period. So really, really high energy. It was as advertised, like when Andrew Berry called him high octane at the NFL Combine. And we got a chance to meet him in passing there. And even then, like you felt that energy. Today it was on full display, though. I think Browns fans are really going to like him if they get a chance to watch or listen to that press conference.
Yeah, and to be fair, it is more than just the energy. And I thought the way he talked about relationships, Mary Kay, was really interesting. And how he gave examples of this player. I think it was C.J. Mosley. He said C.J. Mosley was football first, and then it was getting to know the person. And with other players, it's been getting to know the person and then the football side of it. And I think that's what is ultimately going to make him effective, is that ability to, at this level where this is a job and, now you're the defensive coordinator, you've got to know these guys, explain to them why they're doing what they're doing. They've got to trust you. I just think that knowledge of how to build a relationship and come at it from different ways and figure out, what makes Denzel Ward different from Tyson Campbell, different from Carson Schlesinger. Like, I think a lot of that's going to help him. And that comes from, he sat up there and listed a bunch of them. That comes from all of the mentors he's worked with and all of the people that he's spent time with in the game so far.
Right. And there are some pretty big names. He started his career under Hall of Fame coach Joe Gibbs in Washington. So it started right off the bat with one of the obvious best in the business. And then he spent time with Robert Saleh, now the head coach of the Titans. He was defensive coordinator. I mean, he was head coach of the Jets when Mike Rutenberg was there as linebackers coach. And he's worked with him a couple of times, including in San Francisco. And then you've got Jeff Ulbrich from the Falcons that he's worked under. And he said he taught him so many things. He's also learned a lot from Dom Capers. two-time former NFL head coach and a coordinator, defensive coordinator of 4 different teams, and he's very accomplished and decorated as a coach in this league. And Mike Rutenberg was able to lure him to Cleveland, and I think that's going to be big, not just for him, but for Todd Monken, because he is the only former NFL head coach on this staff. And I think that is invaluable. You need somebody where you can walk down the hall and say, "What do I do about this?" And he can draw on so many of his experiences, not just as a coordinator, but as a head coach. And there's nobody else around here that can say that. So I think that's vitally important. I also think it's important for Mike Rutenberg to have somebody with him on the sidelines, or at least up in the booth or wherever he's going to be, that can be in his ear on game day to help with the play calling. This is the first time he's ever going to be calling a defense. Now, he's called it, here and there piecemeal, but never on a full-time basis. So to have a Dom Capers around to help in that regard, I think it's going to be tremendous for him.
Yeah, and I think for him, just again, this is all first impressions off a press conference, but I do think there is a feeling of like, one, he kind of knows what he doesn't know. And he knows that it is important to lean on some of those assistants, to lean on a Dom Capers, to lean on whoever he needs to lean on to get advice and make this work. And I think that's important. And I'll just say this, one of the things that obviously we all kind of witnessed, he had forgotten to mention a couple of coaches, and I won't say who, but he came back in the media room and he's like, "Hey, I just want to make sure that I shout these guys out too." Like it's that sort of. I mean, this is a guy, Ashley, that for as energetic as he is, as go as he is, he's going to check every box, and he's going to make sure that everything. He talked about work ethic today, and he talked about learning that from Joe Gibbs. Like the solution is to keep working. So as far as that stuff is concerned, I don't think Browns fans have to worry about things falling through the cracks.
Yeah, he was very intentional with that sort of stuff. And he was also very intentional in talking about still wanting this defense to attack. And I think that's always been the most important thing as they enter this next phase. And once it became clear Jim Schwartz wasn't coming back to be the defensive coordinator anymore, that they still found a way to do that because they really are built in a certain way. They're built to play that sort of scheme. And he really leaned into that. He leaned into all the personal stuff. And I think he, as you said, he kind of knows what he doesn't know. And he's ready for this opportunity, but he also seems like a guy who isn't going to be afraid to lean on others when he needs it and ask for help when he needs it.
And we've had a chance to talk about this hire a little bit, but just again, sitting in front of him, Mary Kay, I like that Todd Monken went outside the box on this hire. There were different directions he could have gone, of course. He talked to guys who had called defenses before. I don't know. Maybe he could have coaxed Jim Schwartz to stick around. Maybe he could have tried a little harder on that. I don't know. But there were a lot of ways he could have gone. I'm sure this was a very coveted job as a defensive coordinator. And I think it's a good thing that he went outside the box a little bit and tried to identify a young, up-and-coming coach. We'll see if it works. I think it's got a chance, but we'll see on Sundays. But as of right now, I just think there's a lot to get excited about with him.
I think so too. I think that once again, Jim Schwartz is a very tough act to follow, and you needed something a little bit different and something special. And I think Todd Monken found it. I think he nailed it. Now, they have a mutual friend that kind of made sure that they were going to get off on the right foot together, and they certainly did. They spent a whole entire day together on the last leg of the interview process for Mike Rutenberg, and that was really what clinched it for him. They really hit it off in that interview. And then Mike Rutenberg was talking today about the fact that they have spent the past 2 weeks together, and he knows for a fact that Todd is going to be perfect for this market, perfect for this team. So those guys are really hitting it off, and that's important. That you have to have that trust, that bond with your coordinators, and you just have to feel like you guys are all moving in the same direction. But once again, I think the key, or one of the keys for Mike Rutenberg, is the fact that the defensive staff remains largely intact, and the players know they're coming back to guys that know how to get the best out of them, that know what they do best, they know what their strengths are, and they know this defense.
Right. And also to that point, going the other way is like, Jason Tarver, Ephraim Banda, Jacques Césaire, they can sit there and say, "Hey, man, trust this guy. We trust Rutenberg. You guys can trust him too." They can be that advocate for him in the room. So as he's trying to sort of mend fences or build new relationships, whatever he's trying to do with some of these guys who really loved Jim Schwartz. I keep dropping my phone almost. He he can count on these position coaches, Ashley, to be his advocate in those groups.
Yeah, and to Mary Kay's point about Jim Schwartz being a tough act to follow, like I don't think he seems afraid of that at all. And like I'm sure if he was, he wouldn't be in this position in the first place. But he got asked about Jim, I think basically immediately when he started his press conference today and having to follow him up when so many players obviously loved playing for him. And he went out of his way, I think, to say like nothing but respect for Jim Schwartz, even though he obviously didn't work for him. But that he knows it's about that relationship building, and somebody I think that has a sense for that sort of thing can get the buy-in from players much easier. Like there's something from us even interacting with him today, there's a genuineness to that approach. Like it doesn't feel phony in a way that I think it sometimes can when it's forced. You can tell with Mike Rutenberg it's not forced.
Yeah, I wasn't sitting there thinking, man, this guy's faking it or this guy's putting on a show. I was sitting there thinking, yeah, this is probably what Mike Rutenberg is like all of the time. So Thursdays are going to be very interesting here in Berea when we get to hear from him every week. So let's switch gears to the offensive coordinator. And I think this is interesting. Listening to Travis Switzer today, that is Todd Monken's side of the ball. And Mary Kay, we've been through this before, going back to Hugh Jackson, of course, Freddie Kitchens when he was here, Kevin Stefanski when he first got here. Guys who came in as the head coaches were also going to be the play callers. And they've always kind of hired OCs who you kind of thought, well, that guy probably wants to be a play caller too. And that guy's, a former quarterback or a former quarterback's coach or something like that. Now, I'm sure Travis Switzer wants to continue to grow in this role and wants to eventually be a play caller, probably wants to eventually be a head coach. But this does feel like Todd Monken has this set up a certain way. And Travis Switzer is going to have some agency when it comes to quarterback and the rest of the offense. But it almost feels like he was very intentional in going out and getting Travis Switzer to come with him, a guy he knew from Baltimore, a guy who was the run game coordinator there, to really sort of be more complementary to what Todd Monken is going to do as a play caller and sort of as the de facto OC, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe this other guy should call the plays. It just feels different than other combos we've had like this before.
Yeah, and I think it's a good setup. I really do, because they will play to their strengths. And Todd Monken is so well versed in all things passing game, and he's run so many different kinds of passing systems, and he will be able to adapt and pivot to what his players' strengths are and what they do well. And then, as you mentioned, Travis Switzer comes in with just that really, really strong run game pedigree, coming off 3 years with Derrick Henry, and just has been there for 9 years. He played at Akron. He was an offensive lineman at Akron, so he knows the whole blocking side of it and the running side of it. And I'm sure now he will focus more on the passing side of it too. So he'll add that into his repertoire. But for now, he does complement Todd Monken very well. And they won't be kind of butting up against each other, but working well with each other.
Yeah, and the fact that they have worked well together, they've been in the booth together, all of that stuff. I just think it bodes well for that relationship continuing as Todd Monken, really takes over this offense. This is going to be Todd Monken's offense. And so, I'd have to go through the list. I mean, how many offensive coordinators are there right now in the NFL who were former O linemen? I can't imagine the number is that high. I'm sure there's someone out there. Like I said, I can't go through the list in my brain, but it usually is like a former quarterback or something like that. So I just think this is a really interesting guy to have in place here, Ashley.
Yeah, and he made the point today, Travis Switzer, that he's actually never coached the O-line too, which is kind of another funny wrinkle to all of this. Like he actually started, like I believe he said, like in the weight room was his first kind of intro to the coaching ranks, and that was interesting because he kind of got to learn all pieces, that just the way the chips sort of fell for him. And the other interesting thing I think in all of this, when we talk about Travis Switzer and Todd Monken, he said they didn't have a prior relationship to when Todd got there in 2023. And then that's when he became the run game coordinator, Travis Switzer, after being an offensive quality control coach the previous 2 seasons. So they've worked well together already in those 3 years that Todd was there. And obviously he saw something in him that made him believe he was ready to take on this opportunity now.
And the other thing too, just when we talk about that Monken Schweitzer offense, I think the thing that he continued to harp on, and I think this is when we listen to Andrew Berry talk, and Jerry Jeudy is the poster child for this, right? Andrew talked very glowingly about Jerry at the combine. Travis Switzer talked very glowingly about him today. I really do get the feeling that they looked at this offense and they sort of pointed the fingers at the way, whatever it was, whether it was just not having stability at quarterback, whether it was the system they were running, whatever it was. I don't feel like they were pointing the fingers at the players that much as far as why things weren't working on offense. Now, look, this could change if they go out and go crazy in free agency. And of course, we know they're going to draft a bunch of guys. But I don't know, Mary Kay, when I hear him talk about like having so much faith in Jerry Jeudy and Andrew Berry basically saying, like, I think the offense, if it's more operational, he'll be better. Travis Switzer sitting up there and saying, skill players year to year, there's so many factors that go into their performance. So it's kind of not on them. I don't know. It just feels to me like they are kind of looking at this as like bringing in Todd Monken and this, we're going to fit the offense to what we have style. It almost feels like they look at that as a Band-Aid for kind of what happened the last 2 years.
Well, I do think it is a little bit of an indictment against perhaps the system that they were running or a mix of the systems that they were running the past few years under Kevin Stefanski, where you were going back and forth between Kevin and then Ken Dorsey and then Kevin calling plays and Tommy calling plays. And I do think that they want some stability there. And I do think that they do blame some of the woes of a Jerry Jeudy on just the sort of dysfunction that was kind of going on around him on offense. And a lot of that had to do, of course, with the quarterback upheaval. So it wasn't just all scheme or system or whatever. But I do think that there is some sense of we're going to have a cohesive, one voice, one system, one play caller. Nobody's giving it up midseason. It's going to be Todd Monken's show. We know what he can do. He's got a track record of running it this way. And I think that they feel like a guy like Jerry Jeudy will flourish when that consistency arrives.
Yeah, and I think too, when you have a situation where you keep your GM and you fire the head coach, you are still sort of intrigued, I think, by the talent that GM brings in, obviously. Like, you probably think there is more there with Ced Tillman. You think there is more there with an Isaiah Bond, a Jerry Jeudy. Are those guys the answers? Will there be competition? I'm like, yes, I'm sure they are going to add competition. They're probably going to draft a receiver. Who knows? Maybe they trade for a receiver. They'll add guys and they'll add competition. But I do think there's going to be some level, Ashley, of like, I think Isaiah Bond could be better in a Todd Monken offense than he was in that old offense. And Travis Switzer even mentioned Isaiah Bond today. I think in this building, there is a thinking that change the systems, bring in a different set of eyes, and some of these guys could come out looking better.
I think so too. And I think in some instances, it might be a bit of wishful thinking, but they seem poised to kind of go that route and go through this experiment. And look, I think the reality is, for as much bad as there was with this offense last year, you can't replace everybody in one offseason, even if you wanted to. So some guys you are going to have to try to ride some things out with, get more out of them, see if the system helps, and then, learn to cut your losses if it becomes apparent it's not going to work anymore. But I think there's just so many issues with this offense, particularly on the line, particularly with the pass catching core outside of a Harold Fannin right now. I think it's just question mark after question mark. So I'm not surprised to hear them talk that way about Jerry Jeudy and Isaiah Bond, because like, for their sakes, that might be a speaking it into existence strategy that they're trying to accomplish here. But it's like, what else are you going to do? You can't get 6 new receivers in one offseason and totally rebuild that room and just throw guys to the curb. So it makes sense. That's kind of where they are.
Now, of course, quarterback did come up, and he didn't really say anything different from what Todd Monken had to say. But I don't know, Mary Kay, they keep talking up Deshaun, right? Like that this keeps, and I don't know what the motivation would be other than they actually do believe that this is worth a shot. That doesn't mean they're naming him the starter on March 4th, but when they sit there and say, like, you see what he used to be, paraphrasing, obviously, that intrigues you, that interests you. How can you not be interested in that? Like, there's not really any other motivation to talk up Deshaun. You're not going to trade him. Nobody's going to trade for him. Like, I don't know. The more they talk about Deshaun and the more they leave that door open, I think at the very least, it's worth just taking note that he seems to be very much in the mix.
Yeah, it reinforces that notion, right? I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time that he's coming back and that is the plan, that he is going to be competing for the starting job. And now those guys are giving voice to it. They have confirmed it a number of times. We've heard Todd Monken say the same thing, that he wants to tap back into the 3-time Pro Bowler, the once elite player that Deshaun Watson was. And we heard Travis Switzer say some similar things today. Who wouldn't be intrigued by that skill set when you see what he's put on film, when you see what he's done? That's, of course, why the Browns gave up 3 first-round picks for him. You wouldn't just do that for nothing. So, he was that player, and they are hopeful that maybe they can just tap back into that and see if they can get that out of him. But I think they're equally effusive in their praise of Shedeur Sanders. I think that they have really talked up Shedeur since the combine. And I almost felt like at the combine that I noticed that Todd was way higher on Shedeur there than he was when he was first looking at this situation. And when during his introductory press conference of his own, he seemed to be a little bit more in the camp of, oh, Shadeur's got a long way to go, and we're intrigued by Deshaun. It almost seemed like Shedeur has kind of come up and elevated himself since he's dug into the film and he's seen some of the elite plays that he can make and the possibilities that are there.
Yeah, well, and when you use the phrase elite playmaking, like right off the bat, at the combine, that stands out. And to that point, Ashley, they really are kind of driving these points home about Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders, that they do have a belief in them. I still feel like there's something out there that they're going to do. I don't know, maybe not a huge move, but I still feel like there's somebody else like coming into this competition, and maybe that's a draft pick. But they aren't. Their message has been clear, really going back to last week at the combine all the way through today. Whatever memo Travis Switzer got about the quarterbacks, he stuck to it today. And the more they keep saying it, you've got to believe them at some point.
Yeah, it just feels like that very united messaging at this point. And look, I mean, I think so much of this is just related to what we're saying, the position that they are in and where they are in the draft, what their cap situation is. I mean, the Watson contract situation, like all these things are working together to kind of lead them to where they are now. And again, it's not like you can just totally overhaul some things. So you have to look at the guys you have and say, what can we work with that is already here? Who do we think is going to give us the best chance to win some football games? What is the most enticing about them? And go from there. So again, it's not surprising given the history, I think, of the Shedeur and Deshaun in particular, that we've heard praise of both at this point in the offseason.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key points too, is just it does come down to what are your options. So, we did a pod on Kyler Murray yesterday. Well, if you don't love Kyler Murray, you're not going to go get him. If you don't want to, if you're not interested in Anthony Richardson, you're not going to trade an asset for him. If you don't, I don't know, what if Geno Smith became available? Well, if you don't want that type of quarterback, you're not going to go get Geno Smith. So I think there's some of that too, Mary Kay. It's kind of like, I don't know if there's a better option out there, at least. Like, look, I do think some of these quarterbacks are better than what they have in the building, but that doesn't necessarily mean bringing them in is the right call. And so maybe this is just going to kind of be what it is, at least for now. Like I said, maybe it's just the most likely path is these two guys and then somebody in the draft, whether that's Ty Simpson or Garrett Nussmeier or somebody else. Like, maybe that's the most logical path forward. And so they're just buying into that.
Well, if you recall, in 2022, at this time,
Yes.
nobody had any idea that Deshaun Watson was ending up here, right? At that time, they were still talking about, yes, we're going to look around, but it really didn't seem realistic that they were going to end up with someone else. Now, they had thought at that point about possibly drafting Malik Willis in 2022. But we didn't know at this time last year that, and now we were getting close, but we didn't know at this time last year that Deshaun Watson was going to land on the doorstep of the Cleveland Browns. And they didn't think that was really going to happen either, because he had a say in the matter. He got to choose amongst these teams, and his camp got to choose. And it took a fully guaranteed $230 million contract over 5 years, the very first and still only fully guaranteed contract in the NFL. So the thing to remember as we move forward over the next couple of weeks and maybe even the next couple of months is the fact that anything can happen. Andrew Berry plays big. That's what people have to remember about him. He likes to play big. He likes to roll the dice. He likes to make a splash. He likes to make a trade. He likes to wheel and deal. So we don't know what is happening yet. And we don't know what the conversations are behind the scenes. So they can either march forward with Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders, or they can make a play for someone, or they can draft someone. We don't exactly know yet. And right now, it seems to me like they are going to maintain the status quo and see what Deshaun and Shedeur can do. But we don't know, because until you get into free agency and things start heating up and things start cooking, you just don't know what is right around the corner. And that's the beauty of free agency.
And again, this is why I just, if Monday hits, whatever time, and we see and we find out like Malik Willis is signing with the Cleveland Browns for 3 years, $120 million or $110 million, whatever, something like that. I just wouldn't be shocked. Now, it would be surprising in the sense that it doesn't seem it's going that way. You've talked about that on the pod here a bunch, where you think that Malik Willis situation is going. But like Todd Monken said at the Combine, it usually comes down to money. And if Todd is sitting in Andrew Berry's office saying Malik Willis is the guy and we need to go get Malik Willis, then Andrew's going to go over to Jimmy's office and say, all right, how big of a check can we write here, Jimmy? So I don't know. That's again, Ashley, that's why I just kind of keep coming back to this idea of, I mentioned it in the HMK pod. I feel bad that you weren't on it because you love it when we talk Baker Mayfield Matrix. I mentioned on the Mayfield Matrix that back in 22, we kind of came down to this idea of, well, Baker's probably going to be the best option because I don't know what else is out there. And then all of a sudden the whole Deshaun Watson train gets rolling. So I just, again, I wouldn't rule anything out. And if they decide that their best course of action is to essentially overpay to bring Malik Willis in because they believe he can be their quarterback, I would be surprised, but I would not be like stunned if we see a tweet like that on Monday.
No, and I think us like covering the Deshaun Watson trade, at least for me, it altered my brain chemistry and how I view these things and these things as possibilities, and how you really can never say never, I think, when you have an owner that's willing to spend the money. And that's kind of what Todd Monken was saying about it coming down to money. I think a lot of times these things do. And when you have an owner willing to spend, things can go from not looking like they're going to go your way to suddenly you are getting your way fairly quickly. So that I talked about this when we were going through the whole John Harbaugh sweepstakes very briefly. It always seemed unlikely he was going to end up here. But at the time, again, we were kind of like, you can never really say never when it comes down to the business side of football and the Cleveland Browns and the way they will wheel and deal. As Mary Kay said, they will go big in the offseason. They are not afraid to make big moves. So it would be surprising, like you said, but I wouldn't be that surprised at the end of the day.
Yeah. Surprising, but not shocking, I think. This is the way I'd put it. Okay, we do need to spend like just a couple minutes on special teams because Byron Storer did talk today. I mean, what do we say about special teams? Andre Schmidt's going to be the kicker. They tendered Rex Sunahara, all of that stuff. But Mary Kay, interesting story. A guy who was out of coaching, got back into coaching, has really, been a favorite of Rich Bisaccia, who just stepped down in Green Bay and took a special teams coordinator job at Clemson. This is a phase of the football that the Browns have to get right. They just, it can be forgotten a lot of times, but when it's bad, it's bad. And last year it was bad. And so whatever Byron Storer has in his bag of tricks, he's got to get this thing right.
Well, he does. And I think he's going to need a couple of key players in certain spots to get it right. Now, he's got the kicker. And so they're set there. And that turned out to just be a wonderful addition for them. It really did. And Corey Bojorquez is a free agent, but I'm guessing that they will re-sign him. He's done a really, really, really nice job here. So they would be set at those two positions. And then last year, of course, DeAndre Carter suffered a knee injury and they lost their returner. So they need some dynamic returners. They need to get this return game going. And who knows? I mean, when I was listening to Byron Storer talk today, I was thinking, he should bring in Phil Dawson for a little bit of, just juice for this, just not on a full-time basis, but maybe come in for a couple of weeks during training camp and just kind of bring back the old days of really good Cleveland Browns special teams. Bring in Josh Cribbs and just to kind of fire up that return game a little bit and add some firepower to that because that's what they need. They need special teams to be an asset to this football team, not a liability. And it was in some ways last year because of Andre Schmidt and because of Corey. But the coverage teams and the return games were not up to par. And those two things need to get rolling.
Yeah. I mean, you just can't lose games on special teams. Even the Rams, right? They had all kinds of special teams problems and it was costing them football games. Maybe it cost them a home game in the NFC Championship game, right? Like you can't lose games because of special teams. And the Browns, it wasn't as public league-wide just because they were pretty much out of the running, but we sat and watched it. They were losing games because of special teams.
Yeah, I mean, most notably that Jets game when they gave up 2 return touchdowns in a row. Like, things were, I think, just so ugly here last year, as Mary Kay laid out. But that's, I think, what makes this interesting. And hearing Byron Storer talk today and talk about those coverage units in particular. And he got asked if you had to pick one of your units to be number one in the league, which one would you pick? And he said punt coverage. And he said he thinks that's where it all starts. It's where it starts with his evaluation of players. And the line I thought was interesting, that if guys aren't fighting in punt coverage, it would be basically impossible for him to fight for them on game day. And I think that's going to dictate a lot of those sort of bottom of the roster decisions. And I think also we talked about this like a little bit last year, but there was just so much going wrong. Like that bottom of the roster just did not do the special teams any favors. I don't think, like, only so much of it you can control if you are a coach. There were serious issues. And in my time covering the team, look, they've never been able to figure out returner. They have had some serious bad luck with injuries at that spot. So that is definitely something Byron Storer is going to have to help get right here.
Byron Storer also said that bus drivers are the most important part of the bus company, which personally I agree with. So shout out to Byron Storer, who took a break from coaching to help out with his family business, which was a bus company. So interesting backstory there. All right, that'll do it for Coordinator Day here in Berea. Cleveland.com/Browns. That's where you can become a football insider. It's the blue banner at the top of the page. We're on video, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Click that podcast tab. You'll get to see a bunch of our podcasts on video. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. And of course, all of our socials. Any social you've got, go search Orange and Brown Talk. You will find us there. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.